Before we begin, if you value serious, well-researched history that goes beyond recycled facts, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with your thoughts or additional knowledge, and share this video with anyone who cares about wartime survival and forgotten history. This channel exists for people who want depth, accuracy, and lessons that still matter today. This episode is titled WWII Superfoods You've Never Heard of But Should. And for the next minute, I want your full attention. When we talk about World War II, most documentaries focus on weapons, battles, and political leaders. But wars are not won by tanks alone. Wars are survived by calories, nutrients, and ingenuity. Across Europe, Asia, and even parts of Africa, civilians and soldiers faced near-total collapse of food systems. Imports vanished. Fertilizers were rationed. Livestock was slaughtered early and gone by mid-war. What kept millions alive were not luxury foods or heroic supply drops, but humble, often forgotten plants and substitutes that delivered calories, vitamins, and endurance when nothing else remained. These were not trendy health foods. They were survival foods, and understanding them gives us a clearer picture of how societies endure prolonged crisis. Let's move straight into the substance. How wartime scarcity forced nations to rediscover overlooked nutrition. By 1941, much of Europe was operating on strict rationing. Germany, Britain, the Soviet Union, and occupied territories all faced different shortages, but the underlying problem was the same. Protein, fats, and fresh produce were dangerously limited. Governments and civilians turned to foods previously dismissed as animal feed, weeds, or famine rations. What makes these foods important is not nostalgia, but their efficiency. They grew in poor soil, required little processing, and delivered real nutritional value. For modern survivalists, gardeners, and historians, these foods reveal how nutrition adapts under pressure. Jerusalem artichoke quietly became a calorie lifeline. The Jerusalem artichoke, widely grown across occupied Europe, became a critical survival crop because it thrived where potatoes failed. It tolerated cold, poor soil, and neglect. Civilians ate it raw, boiled, or fermented, while distillers converted it into alcohol for fuel and medical use. Nutritionally, it provided carbohydrates through inulin rather than starch, which helped stabilize energy levels. During food shortages, families planted small backyard plots and harvested continuously through winter. Today, this knowledge applies directly to resilience gardening. A single planting can regenerate year after year with minimal effort, making it one of the most reliable emergency food crops available. Nettles shifted from weed to wartime nutrient powerhouse. Stinging nettles became a staple in Britain and parts of Scandinavia during the war. Once cooked, the sting disappears, leaving behind a plant richer in iron, calcium, and vitamin C than most cultivated greens. Wartime cookbooks openly promoted nettle soup as a meat replacement. Civilians gathered them from bombed-out lots and countryside edges, drying them for winter use. From a practical standpoint, nettles demonstrate how wild foraging filled nutritional gaps when farms could not. Learning safe identification and preparation of nettles today provides a renewable source of micronutrients without reliance on supply chains. Acorns were transformed from animal feed into human survival food. In Germany, Italy, and parts of Eastern Europe, acorns were collected, leached, ground, and used as flour or coffee substitutes. The key was removing tannins through repeated soaking, a technique passed down from earlier famine generations. Acorn flour added fats and calories when wheat was unavailable. This was not desperation alone, but applied food science using available resources. Modern survival application is clear. Knowing how to detoxify wild foods expands edible options dramatically during long-term crises. Sugar beets carried entire populations through calorie shortages. Sugar beets were already an industrial crop, but during the Second World War they became a primary civilian calorie source across Europe. Families boiled them into syrups, dried them into chips, and even fermented them into alcohol. They provided carbohydrates when imported sugar, just vanished. More importantly, sugar beets stored well underground, allowing winter access without refrigeration. For preparedness today, this really highlights the importance of root crops that store in place and resist spoilage. Soy and lupin. Beans replaced meat without modern processing. Protein shortages pushed Germany and Japan to rely heavily on soybeans and lupins. These legumes were processed into flours, pastes, and meat substitutes long before modern plant-based trends. Lupins, once considered bitter and inedible, were soaked and fermented to remove toxins. They delivered complete protein when livestock was gone. The lesson here is simple. Protein security does not require animals if processing knowledge exists. Learning traditional soaking and fermentation methods makes legumes viable in low-energy environments. Fish meal and bone broth sustained nutrition when meat disappeared. In coastal regions and besieged cities, fish scraps and bones were boiled into nutrient-dense broths. Nothing was wasted. Bone broth provided collagen, minerals and fats essential for preventing deficiency diseases. This practice required no refrigeration and minimal fuel. For modern survival planning, it reinforces the value of whole animal use and nutrient extraction rather than reliance on muscle meat alone. Why these World War II superfoods still matter today. These foods mattered because they worked under extreme pressure. They required little technology, minimal inputs, and delivered reliable nutrition. Applying this knowledge today means growing resilient crops, learning basic processing techniques, and understanding how nutrition functions during scarcity. A small garden with Jerusalem artichokes, legumes, and foraged greens can provide more long-term security than stored rations alone. These are not theories. They are historically tested survival strategies. World War II forced humanity to relearn old truths about food, resilience, and adaptation. If this episode added real value to your understanding of wartime survival, subscribe to the channel, share this with fellow history enthusiasts, and comment below with any forgotten foods or sources you've studied. This channel grows through serious discussion and shared knowledge.